Humanity is, well, we don't really know. Technically they are vertebrate mammals, they call themselves, but they act like none other in the galaxy. They spread like a wildfire in a manner that had never been seen before. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. We, and the caretakers of the stars, are the oldest race by far. Our species has observed the evolution of the galaxy and her inhabitants for over 1 million millennium. We watched as humanity grew and adapted, but theirs was a slow ascent. Thousands of other races formed within a period of around 1,000 years of the humans. Many, like the Grashi and the Tenval, died off from constant warfare. Others, like the Eb Novosesh, consumed the resources of their planet and their system, and failing to escape their sphere of influence, it died and became their tomb. Humanity charted a similar course. Whereas Engi and the Gravar grew and built and existed in harmony, humanity grew and built in order to destroy. We catalogued their presence, studied their anatomy, and busied ourselves watching other races which we were sure would become the shepherds of the galaxy. And while our backs were turned for a while, we didn't miss much. While the Zengi developed basic flight and rocketry, the humans built cities and castles and monuments to their own supposed might, something even the vain Gravar had forgone. When the Gravar took the first leaps into space, humanity painted and explored. The Zengi colonized 5 of their 7 moons, while the humans made their first electric lights. But we blinked and missed most of that. We turned back to watch humanity grow, and in a moment we knew they were to die. Millions of men, hundreds of thousands of machines, all cast into the mud over a squabble of kings. Half a continent was trod into dirt. We wept, for even as little promise as they showed, the death of humanity would be a sad day. However, to our surprise, they stopped fighting. Paper was written on, maps were drawn up, and rage simmered. Still, the death had stopped. We rejoiced, for perhaps the bloodshed had been enough to awaken a sense of empathy. To our dismay, such was not the case. Vengeance propelled evil men to power, and havoc was unleashed just a few years later. Great machines carried men across the open land to fight and die with remarkable speed. We noted that in the previous war and the intervening peace the progress of their flight, medicine, and production technologies had accelerated, outstripping even the talented Gikyad. We wept anew as the humans mindlessly slaughtered their own kind on and off the field of battle in horrifying numbers. Genocide was beyond everyone, including the warlike Gravar, and here humanity exterminated its own by the millions. Yet again, the violence stopped abruptly on half the planet. We were hopeful, and they horrified, for when humanity split the atom, everyone took notice, and we were afraid. A pact was signed by the spacefaring species that none would interfere with the humans. It was best that this candle be left to burn out, they decided. We were impartial and unbiased, and even we agreed. But after the war, there was peace, even freedom. One nation reached out to protect another. The peace was tense, but it was a peace. For the next 100 years they continued as such, but then one day, rockets began to launch. Humanity had produced limited spaceflight before, but this was unparalleled. Thousands of rockets were launched into the atmosphere and into orbit around their moon. Within the decade, a colony covered half the lunar surface, and space stations orbited their cradle planet. They experimented with pulse drives and space-bending FTL travel, something we had predicted they would never conceive, at least for another 1,000 years at our estimated timeline. It was then that we began to look. It was then that we examined the human culture and history on the level that it truly deserved. We found that while they spent the first 96.7835% of their existence in caves, they had made 99.468% of their technological advancement in just the last 3.2165% of their collective lives. When other species had advanced at a constant rate, humanity's success inspired it, and their will to survive kept them from extinction, although they teetered on the edge of the abyss for their whole lives. They had developed mathematics on par with our own while they were still writing on parchment. They designed craft that they could not have realistically hoped their great-great-grandchildren would build, but design them they did. Humans were a race of thinking warriors, something that set them apart. It was then, around the time they colonized their red planet, a nearest gas giant, that the Great War began. In the last war of this scale, atomic weapons had ended the hostilities. In this one, they were used every other cycle. Asteroids were blown to pieces and irradiated. Capital ships were incinerated in microseconds, and still they fought. After a long while, peace reigned once more, and the humans rebuilt. The pact held, and they were left alone. After a time, they perfected FTL drives, and they expanded into the Gulf. They arrived at their nearest stars quickly, and they colonized. They set up rapidly in the gulf of empty space that we had left vacant as a buffer to let the humans burn themselves out. However, it seemed that that would not happen. Still, many races argued. The Kikyad and the Zenji voted to stay away from humanity, given its violent tendencies, while the Gravar argued in favor of wiping them out, to starve off a war that would have been costly for all. And while they argued, the humans built and advanced and grew to dominate the planets they claimed. The humans were very physically sturdy. They were not the fastest, strongest and most agile race, but they blended all of those attributes with a nearly supernatural will to survive. The human body, as is the case with all sapient species, is limited greatly by their own mind. But when Gravar or others are threatened, they fight, and often die. Humans don't. They don't fight. A fight implies that it can be won by either party. When a human is threatened sufficiently, there is nothing they will not do to survive. And this frightened many of us looking down from our heavenly posts. After a time, the humans waged small wars with neighbouring races, but these were petty border disputes. The humans traded equally with all, and they became well respected among the stars. The Kikyad offered to give plasma weaponry to them, but the humans declined, insisting that their solid-state projectile and kinetic weapons were sufficient, and they were for their petty squabbles with their greedy neighbours. That all changed, however, when the Gravar Council decided that the humans had overstayed their welcome. The Gravar had always hated the humans, though it isn't clear why. Perhaps it was a perceived threat. We will never know. No one asked them, and now there is no one left to ask, because one day the Gravar military sees a human colony ship, vented all the compartments into space, killing every soul on board, and then loading the ships with explosives. The ship was sent to a human world, where it crashed into a spaceport and detonated. Over 7 billion humans died in the resulting explosion and ash cloud. The humans saw this as the ultimate act of aggression, and in that singular moment, every human heart and mind was turned towards the Gravar, and they rose up as one in righteous indignation. And the rest of the galaxy feared for its very existence. Every ship was weaponized, every person armed, each colony world became a fortress. In under 6 months, their plasma weapons became the most powerful in existence, and their ships grew faster. Their war effort was nothing short of monstrous. Every fear that had been brewing in the galaxy since the humans unleashed the power of the atom in their own biosphere was resurrected in full form. The humans marched the war, and there was no stopping them. The humans landed first on a sparsely populated world. The Gravar military was not expecting them there, and the fighting was brutal and short. Not a single Gravar soldier survived, as everyone that surrendered was beheaded then and there. All civilians were rounded up and sent off on ships to the nearest Gravar-controlled planet. No one expected this. The Gravar lashed out at a military outpost. The siege lasted a month, and the Gravar lost when a human fleet surrounded them, and, using weapons designed to destroy planets, the Gravar ships were obliterated. When asked later, the human admiral described the reason for his actions. It may have been like mowing your lawn with a thermonuclear warhead, but after the radiation is washed out of the soil, the grass simply knows not to grow there. The Gravar took this to heart and attacked another civilian target. After an attempted invasion that claimed the lives of an estimated 4.5 billion Gravar, only 2.5 billion humans died. None were military, only well-armed and moderately trained civilians. The Gravar, refusing to admit defeat, glassed the planet. It was then that we realized that not only were the humans adept at killing, we realized it was in their evolution. They evolved in a world where danger was so commonplace that one simply overcame it. There was no avoiding it, so they simply learned to deal with it. Over time, their bodies were rebuilt for war, and through culture, their minds were as well. When the human high command learned of the glassing of a civilian world, the resulting orders echoed pages of their history we had hoped were long forgotten. The humans amassed a massive fleet and charged headlong into Gravar space. They blockaded 15 planets, 7 military installations, 7 densely populated planets, and a single planet that was very resource-rich. It had an ocean that covered 80 to 90% of its surface, and the land that there was being mined extensively. The humans invaded the planets one by one. The fighting lasted over a year over those planets, both in space and on the ground, and they went to great pains to not kill civilians. After the military had been eradicated, and they had been truly eradicated through combat and execution, they set about packing the civilians into ships. These ships were sent off into space, and they soon arrived at the ocean world. As they entered orbit, their shields, engines, and methods of steering were eliminated, allowing them to break up in the atmosphere of the planet and fall into the ocean. Purposeful genocide was committed for nearly 4 months. An estimated 50 billion Gravar drowned to death in the hulks of their ships. After the genocide was done, the human ships glassed the planet for good measure. The Gravar offered their unconditional surrender. It was ignored. For the next 7 years, humanity waged what amounted to a holy war against the Gravar. Millions of humans died in battle, while billions of Gravar perished. It was abundantly clear that the humans could simply glass each planet and have done. Instead, they charged into battle with an unparalleled ferocity. One soldier, when asked why the humans did this, said, humanity, all of us, want to personally watch each and every one of them die. After 7 years of conflict, the humans stopped their war of extermination after encircling the Gravar homeworld. They glassed the military outposts, rounded up the civilian population, and shipped them off to a nearby habitable planet, and used a gravity well to drag their old planet into the system's star. Now the Gravar endure, but only just. In just 3 generations they have regressed, without technology, over 100,000 years. What is more, the humans have claimed the ultimate revenge. The Gravar have, in their newly reclaimed primitive state, based a religion around humanity. The humans have not fired a shot in anger since, although no less than 46 governments have been overthrown by their civilian populations for being aggressive towards humanity. Truly, humanity is the embodiment of endurance, ingenuity, and cold, unfeeling hatred.